Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a deep breath and pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where we are going to empower ourselves and others to live more purposeful lives filled with passion. Jared, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, my friend. How are you?
Doing well. Just a little lower energy than usual, fasting for the month of Ramadan, but it's all good.
Yeah, much respect on that, and I felt terrible as I brewed coffee and poured a glass of water. I forgot my man can't drink right now. So,
no worries.
But one of the things I do want to do is I want to do Ramadan with you and just go through that awakening and that journey. And I love when you push yourself to that new limit, what you find out about yourself. So maybe next year podcast, we'll have a whole group of us do it together, and we'll kind of share the story and the journey together.
Yeah, you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. I don't know. Right now, I'm going to enjoy it.
There you go. All right. Well, this morning we have a exciting episode. It is titled You versus You. We've talked a little bit about how the most important relationship you have with yourself, but it can also be the most hindering relationship. You are the only one who holds yourself back from things. So we're going to talk a little bit about the inner voice that you hear inside and how you deal with you versus you. So I have a question for Jared to start us off. Jared, what would you say is the most common thing that your inner voice tells you?
I think that's changed over time. I would tell you that in my 20s and as a teenager, the most common thing my voice would tell me is why I couldn't do something, or all the obstacles that would be in the way, how hard things were going to be, how difficult things were going to be. And I got really good at practicing pushing past that. And I was blessed with an ability to take negative voices, whether it's external or internal at some point, and really twist them to motivate me and push forward. So that was earlier. And now as I've matured more in life, and we'll kind of talk about it on this podcast, how do you process that negative voice? Now, I very seldom have negative voices because I just have real strong belief, but it came from practicing over and over. How do I deal with negativity? How do I deal with the doubt that creeps in? Because everybody has it. Mm-hmm. And the misconception out there is that the successful people don't feel fear. They don't feel doubt. They don't feel insecurities. And that's not true. They feel it just like the rest of us. They just deal with it better.
You said voices, plural. Mm-hmm. So does that mean, do you hear different voices in your head? Or did you hear when you were younger?
Yeah, I think it's just like reading a book. When you read a book, your mind creates images, right? You hear the characters. You assign different traits and different looks to characters, and then a lot of times we go watch the movie and we're disappointed, right? We're like, well, Peter didn't look like that in my book, right? So I think it's the exact same. When you hear those voices, for the most part, we know where they came from and we know who said them to us, whether it was external or I created it in my own head, and you hear different things. And I think that's the fascinating thing, because once you delve into that, then you can actually move past it, right? And once I figure out, like, wait a second, why does this voice sound like this person? How did this happen? And you go back to the root cause of when that came from, then I think you can start to actually address it and move forward instead of being hindered by it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about my personal voices too. How do you, and I feel that I don't really think about it too often, right? We just go about our day-to-day tasks, and maybe we hear stuff, but we just continue to execute on whatever's on the agenda for the day. Yeah. How do you move into that? How do you take a moment to realize what is going on, like what these voices are telling you?
I think that's a great point, and I would disagree with you partially in that most of us don't continue to execute. You continue to execute, which is why you're doing stuff like this and why you're successful in different aspects of your life. But unfortunately, I think many of us, when that voice pops in our head, it halts us. It stops us. We no longer execute because if we move forward, we have to face that fear. So a lot of times those fears limit us. They limit our belief in ourselves. They limit what we're going to do, what we're going to accomplish. And we got to get better than that, right? We got to be better than that, because if I'm going to fail, I want to fail trying, not failing, fearing trying. Because if I try it and I'm no good, at least I know.
Yeah.
But if I'm afraid to even try it, I failed and I never even gave myself a shot. And that's where I think this episode is going to hit home with some people is, how do we move past this? How do we move forward? And how do we continue, as Ali said, to execute in the face of fear, in the face of doubt, in the face of negativity? So I would throw back to you, Ali. How is it in your life, because you're a lot younger, but you're taking risks that other people don't take. You're facing fears, but you continue to execute. What is it? And maybe, or if you're even conscious of it, how is it that you're continuing to move forward instead of letting fear stop you?
Now that you talk about childhood, I think a big voice in my head has been my father's for a long time, and having these expectations, and me always trying to meet those expectations, because it's for my father, it's always like, it's never good enough, right? To continue to keep going. So I think now I've almost adopted some of that mentality as my own, because I feel that now it is my voice. It is my voice. And I think because expectations were so high, that my inner voice calls out my bullshit anytime. Whenever my inner voice is like, maybe you can't do that, or you're tired or whatever. It's like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? No, you got to go, you got to go and execute. However, I will say that I have been finding, especially now, shout out to a good friend of mine, Matt Gonzalez, who sent me a book for my birthday called The One Thing That Produces Extraordinary Results, that I really need to narrow my focus. I think right now I have too much going on. And a part of that may be because of my inner voice always telling me to execute. I will say though that it's a great problem to have. It's a better problem than not have executed on anything.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you do, and that I want people to really pay attention to it, and we've done talks about our circle of five and who we hang out with, is it's much easier to move forward and silence your inner voice when you put yourself, like you do, in specific groups where everybody is moving forward. Right? Flip the script. If you have doubts, limiting beliefs, fear of trying, fear of failing, and you hang out with a bunch of other dudes that are thinking the same thing, then I would argue most people won't execute, because everybody's not executing. Mm-hmm. Right? So now if you decide to execute in that crowd and you fail, you're definitely going to stand out, because everybody else is playing it safe.
Yeah.
But your circle is the opposite. If you play it safe and pull back, I'm going to come to you and be like, Ollie, what happened here? We had goals for this, and I don't even see you trying. Right now, you're going to stand out for failing to even try. And so I think that's an important thing for our listeners, and honestly, part of what this community is. This is a place to come together, face fears, all the other stuff we've talked about, and take action and move forward, because that's really the only way you're going to learn.
Yeah.
But your circle influences you.
How about not inner voice, but projecting other things with yourself, like journaling? Do you journal?
Yeah, every morning.
Okay.
Every morning.
So journaling.
I journal.
Or even conversing with yourself. So recently, I think I told you guys I've done a little bit over the past few years. I've had conversations with myself in the mirror and have tried to be not two different people, but me versus me, really having a conversation, having more somebody, having me that's judging and being real, and then having me of like, okay, taking it. What do you think about journaling and those types of exterior conversations with yourself?
I love it, because now I'm taking control of my mindset. I'm taking control of my outlook. far too many of us wake up every day and our mood, our goals, what we're going to achieve for the day is strictly dependent on whatever the universe throws at us. Right? I mean, think about it. Like, so many people wake up every day like that. And I did it for a while. Waking up and writing what I'm grateful for, setting my intentions for the day, meditating. Now I'm in charge. Now I'm setting the tone for what the day is going to bring me. Is it going to bring problems? Yes, it should. Are there going to be obstacles? Absolutely. But now I've set my mindset for how I want to attack them, how I want to see them. Traffic jam in the morning. I can either be pissed off and sit in traffic, or I can say, great time to listen to a podcast.
On purpose.
I have more time to learn. Either way, you're sitting in traffic. But I want to go back to earlier, that inner voice, and I want to share something. And when I processed and I actually thought of it this way, it really changed a lot of my view. And here's why. For most of my life, my dad was somebody that limited me. Right? Or so I thought. And understand, my dad was 19 when I was born. My mom was 17. So they were kids growing up right along with me. But for as long as I can remember, if I told my dad, hey, I want to go do this, I would immediately be hit with, well, have you thought about this, that, this? You know, this could happen, that could happen. Here's an obstacle. It was never like, dude, just go do it and see how it works. So for most of my life, I looked at my dad and I took that and I was like, I will prove you wrong. I will prove you wrong. I'll prove you wrong. And it was more like a negative energy. Like, I wasn't doing it for the joy of the accomplishment. A lot of times I did things just to prove him wrong that I could actually do it. And it wasn't until my kids became teenagers that I actually stopped and thought about it. What was his intention? Right? And if you think about it from his perspective, he's a 19-year-old who suddenly has a family. Suddenly has to make completely different life decisions than he thought. So when he said, hey, have you thought about this, thought about that, was he really saying you can't do it? Was he saying I don't believe in you? Or was he trying to protect you from the things that took his life in a different path, from his failures? And maybe we just didn't converse about it the same way. When I started thinking about why he would tell me things I viewed as negative and saw it from his perspective, it was actually enlightening to me that, hey, maybe he was just trying to protect me. Maybe he was actually trying to keep me from hurting myself, from suffering fear and failure, and we just didn't converse it. And the reality is this. So many people, and I heard it last week in some of our mentorship groups, if my dad told me when I was 16 years old that it's going to be very hard to make it to Major League Baseball, that was my dream. If you thought about this and that and this and that, I was 16. That's 30 years ago. Why do I still allow that conversation and the negativity I felt when I was 16 to direct the inner voice in my head today? But think about it. A lot of people will say, well, my dad said this, my mom said this, my old boss said that. How long ago was that? What context was that? And why do we give it so much power that something that was said to me when I was 16 still creates doubt in my mind 30 years later?
Wow.
Right? Think of it. And I guarantee my kids are going to be like, I think I'm a great dad. There's probably going to be points in my kid's life where they're going to be like, hey, Dad, when you said that, it really, it made me doubt myself.
Wow.
It wasn't my intention. But we let it. Think about this. Some kids will have trauma, and trauma happens and it's awful. But if it happens when you're 8 years old and you're now 50, but you allow that to define you, we got to look at that. We got to say, wait a second, where's my power? And my power comes from when I take your information, I think about why you would have told me that, and then I decide how much weight I'm going to give it. Mm-hmm. What you told me is advice when I'm 16 doesn't really carry a whole lot of weight in my mid-40s.
Have you had that conversation with your dad about when that 16-year-old
I'm in the
conversation?
process of it.
Okay.
Right? I'm in the process of it because we're not super close. I don't see him very often. We live different lifestyles. But I will tell you, even I'm doing it in small chunks. And we talked about this last week, is the fact that I'm even willing to be like, hey, wait a second, maybe they didn't mean it that way, is progress. The fact that now I'm saying, hey, wait, even if you did mean it that way, it really has no weight now. I'm not 16 anymore.
Right.
I can decide if I want to face fears. I can decide if I want to do this or not do that. And I'm not going to let this thing continue to weigh me down for 30 years.
Right. But you're saying that it has, right? At least in a small sense.
For sure it did.
Right?
No, heavy.
And I think that it's very good that you can identify a specific conversation. But I think for a lot of people, they don't even know what it was that happened. Here's an example for me. I was given a speech in my Toastmasters club, and I was challenged because most of my speeches are really positive, high energy, lots of movement, and I was challenged to try to inspire with a somber speech. And I remember thinking about it for a while. I was like, what? And I thought about, like, what could I do? And the speech title was called I Love You to Misery. And I think I spoke about it on a previous podcast, how I spoke about a little bit of the physical abuse that when my dad had beat up my mom. And I remember thinking back on that, and it kind of brought up things that I wasn't aware of. So how do you think people can explore and find these instances in their life to where they're like, oh my God, this conversation right here, like you're saying, that 16-year-old baseball, this conversation right here has been one of the primary catalysts for a lot of the negative emotions and ideas that go on in my head. How do you think our listeners can try and find that like you have?
I think you just be honest with yourself. I don't believe it's that hard to pinpoint where your negative voice comes from or where your limiting beliefs come from, if you accept that that's what they are, right? And I think just being more aware, like we've talked a lot about self-assessment and being aware of your emotions and being aware of, hey, wait a second, why do I feel this way about this? Why am I not moving forward? Why am I intentionally not doing things I said I was going to do, knowing that success is around the corner? Right? That's a limiting belief. Okay, so what is it that's holding me back? And I think when people really explore their beliefs and explore where they're at, I don't think it's that difficult. But I think we kind of hide it and we push it back and we mask it as, well, I'm happy to have a job, or I'm just, I'm content with this, and I'm just happy here. And if you are, then great. But I know a lot of people are using that as a crutch for why they're not doing what they really want to be doing. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it comes from being honest with yourself and looking into inside for why I'm limiting myself instead of blaming everybody on the outside.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. Appreciate you sharing that.
Well, it was crazy because honestly, man, it felt like it bled over into other relationships, right? And then kind of goes back to the one we did last week about collaborating or threat. And I spent a lot of my life not who I am today, for sure. And I believe a lot of it was how I was viewing my dad and how I felt like, man, I don't want to be anything like that. So I was putting up, like we talked about before, barriers and walls, and it affected other relationships. And I'll be perfectly honest, even though I'm still processing talking to him about everything, the fact is I've just accepted that he loved me the best he could. And part of the way he showed love was to try and protect me by telling me all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing in life.
No.
But when you're 14, 15, 18, and you don't have any life experience and somebody tells you all the bad things instead of encouraging the dreams,
right?
At least for me, it's easy to be resentful. And I guess that's what I felt for a big period of my life, is I resented different things. Mm-hmm. And by writing and thinking it through and really going like, wait a second, why do I feel this way? It's allowed me to lighten the load a little bit. To be a little lighter and to just accept, like, this is what it was. I'm not 16. He's not that guy anymore. Like, why would I continue to let that have so much weight over my life? It's time to move forward.
And those are amazing insights. Definitely hitting home for me on some of these. I'm hoping for our listeners as well. I wanted to bring up a point too. You reminded me of a book I read. It's called The Way of the Superior Man. And in that book, they talk a lot about masculine energy and feminine energy. So not necessarily being male or female. There's some females that carry high masculine energy and some males that carry more feminine energy. But one analogy that he noted, and I resonated a lot with what you're saying with my dad, because my dad, it would always motivate me by criticizing me, right? And almost like a coach would, like a football coach. Like I remember high school football, what the hell is that? Get off your ass, and just yelling at you. And in The Way of the Superior Man, they talk about how masculine energy does get motivated by that, to where you'll be more motivated if your coach is like, what the hell kind of shit was that? I know you can do better, blah, blah, instead of, hey, man, you need to do a little bit better here, blah, blah, and directing it that way. But there is a balance, right? And I think that if you go too much on one side, like maybe your father did, maybe my dad did, you start to actually adapt or adopt those beliefs that maybe I am not good enough. Maybe I can't get to that next level. What's your take?
Well, I think there's a couple things on that. First, I would be curious when that book's written, because you think about
last 6-7 years.
Oh, really? It's recent. You think about to our parents' generation, and if you had to think of one coach that defined that era, who would you pick?
I don't know.
I'd say like Bobby Knight. Right? Like if I had to think of one coach that defined like the 80s, it'd be Bobby Knight. And how did he coach? Threw chairs, called people names, yelled, screamed. So that was kind of modeled for exactly what you said. How do you motivate people? How do you get them to do things? It doesn't work today. If you think to today's coaches, you think of like Mike Krzyzewski, whatever sport you're into, like the guy that's building up character, that's building you. So I think it's double-edged there. I think there's a certain amount of like, hey, here's a challenge for you. But I also think you want to instill belief and confidence. And that's the challenge we have as parenting in today's world, is how do we encourage that? How do we say, hey, yeah, there's going to be struggles, there's going to be obstacles, but go after it anyhow. And at least for me, that's kind of how my parenting style is I want my kids to take risk. I want them to get hurt a little bit. Because if they're not going to be good at something, I want them to find out on their own, not because I impose some kind of a belief into them. But then I also ask myself, if I had that same conversation now with all my life experience, would I have taken it as negative? Or would I have taken it as, hey, here's some things to look out for?
Right?
Like, we don't know. But for some reason, we allow a conversation 30 years ago to limit us for many, many years in all facets of life. Yep. When if we actually stop and think about it, like, wait a second, why does this conversation have so much more weight than all the times he said, I love you? Why does this conversation have so much more weight than the times he said, I was proud of you? Right?
Yeah,
we artificially assign it, which is great, because then we can reassign it. We can explore it and go, wait a second, this is no longer weight. I don't give this weight. I'm going to give this conversation weight. You can control your thoughts. You can control what that little voice is going to tell you. Is it going to tell you you can and you will? Or is it going to tell you you can't and you won't?
Yeah, it comes back to you versus you, right? You need to sit down with a mirror right there in the other chair, right? Look at yourself and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why do I think this way? Because you're the one who is interpreting whatever dad said, whatever mom said, whatever brother said. You're the one who decides what that means. You can decide that's coming from a place of love. You can decide my dad hates me, whatever. You're the one who decides that. So it does come back to you versus you. It really is. It really is. You put the spin on that. So
let me ask you, Ali, before you ask another one. Why do you think most people will not, or have not, hopefully they will after this podcast, explored that inner voice more? Why do you think they haven't really looked inside for the reasons instead of external?
I think it's a lack of self-belief, self-respect, to where many people don't value their own opinion, so they don't search deeper for it, right? It's kind of like the advice. People are looking for advice. We're all watching YouTube videos, and don't get me wrong, I'm always seeking knowledge and doing that as well. But maybe people just don't value what they truly believe, what they truly think, and that's so important. It's so important. So I think it's just a lack of self-respect, a lack of self-belief of like, what do I think?
Yeah.
Right? What do I think?
And I would add one more thing. I think it's easier, right? And that's just the truth, and people may not like it, but I firmly believe it. If I always blame you for why I'm not where I want to be in life, if I blame this person for something they said 30 years ago and that has caused me to never take action, so that's why I'm where I'm at in life, and I'm not happy, I want more, but I'm not willing to do more, I'm not willing to step forward, and it's because of what you did, it's easy.
It is
It's
easier.
external, I can blame. When you look internal, it's going to be tougher, right? Because you're going to process the emotions. You're going to have to really think about, wait a second, is this really me or is it you? Mm-hmm. And if it's my own voice I hear, right, because we've talked a lot about external voices, if it's your own voice you're hearing, then that is something you've created, right? Whether it's from past experiences, whether it's from trauma, whatever the case may be, now you have your own voice telling you why you can't do something, why you're not good enough, right? So to explore that, it can be hard for people. But the only way to really move past it is to know, where is it coming from?
Right.
And I think a lot of people take the easy way out and they just allow it to continually limit them and blame, versus really going, hey, wait a second, I am responsible for this. I'm responsible for how I feel. I'm responsible for how I think. I'm responsible for how I'm going to act. Let me fix some things. Let me address it, move forward.
And it's so easy to take that easy way out, because as soon as we wake up, it's a million other voices, right? Most people, I'm guilty of it too. I've tried to kind of shy away from it, but most of the time, one of the first things I do in the morning is grab my phone. Right, grab my phone, and it's already other information, right? Luckily, I do have a good habit of setting aside some time for a morning meditation, which I think is great. You do gratitude meditation every morning?
I do, 10 minutes.
That's solid, super solid. I think if everybody can at least do a few minutes of meditation, but we're taking all of these voices, and it's easy to just go with the time consumers, the time killers, the social media, the Netflix, everything to consume, to where it's not common, it's not practiced. People can't be alone. You know what I mean? Like I know a lot of people that they have to have a TV on or a laptop on or something on, because they can't stand the silence. They can't stand to be alone.
And why do you think that is? What happens when it's quiet? What happens when they're alone?
Then it's you and you.
They hear the voice. Right, we're literally conditioned to mask the voice. Mm-hmm. We mask it through our phones. We mask it through TV. We mask it through music. The reality is, let's quit masking the voice and figure out how to use the voice to our benefit. So we've talked a lot about the voices that kind of scare us, voices that kind of keep us from doing what we want to do and becoming who we want to become. The great thing about it is you can train that voice to encourage you, to push you forward, to make you take risk. David Goggins talks about in his book, You Can't Hurt Me, fantastic book. He calls it his cookie jar. And I like that analogy because I think most people can see it. When he has a negative voice, or a voice of doubt, a voice of trauma, a voice telling him he can't do it, instead of letting that voice run wild and paralyze him, he goes to what he calls his cookie jar. And it's the place he puts all the past successes in his life. And we've talked about that in our group, right? We've all done things we're proud of that people may not have believed in, that were difficult, and we got it done. So when we're faced with a new challenge, instead of letting doubt creep in, instead of letting fear stop you, accept it for a second. Oh, wait a second, I hear that voice again. Let me redirect this. Oh, wait a second. Remember that time I did this that was super hard? Oh, how'd that feel? Oh, yeah, that's right. It felt great. Right? Pull in positive thoughts. Pull in thoughts of encouragement. The choice is yours, because think about it. Neither of the set of thoughts are actually physically real. Right? You're like, your negative thoughts aren't right there in front of you. It's only here. Which means now you can redirect it. Instead of going to your failures in life, pull up the times you've overcome things, the times you've been successful. And now, oh yeah, let me take that risk, right? Now we can move forward. And I think that's important. We're all going to have voices of doubt. We're all going to have voices of fear. It's normal, right? That's how the mind works. It tries to protect you by showing you what could happen. But sometimes it forgets all the good shit we've already done. We can pull that back in, but it won't happen on accident. Right? You got to know, hey, what am I really proud of? What do I really stand for? What really makes me want to do this next hard thing? Like you, what makes you want to execute in the face of negativity, the face of doubts? What's your past successes? It's your vision for where this success leads you. But I think too many of us don't know what that is. Right? If you ask them what are they afraid of, they'll tell you right away. Ask them, hey, what does your strength come from? Where does your ability to take risk? How does your ability to want more in life, where does it come from?
Yeah.
And if I have that readily available, then I can silence negativity quick.
Yeah.
Because it's ridiculous to think it's never going to be there.
Oh, no, it always is.
It could be an external source that creates it. It could be a relationship that creates it. It could be your own head that creates it.
Always is. Every day.
But how do I get back on track? How do I continue to go? Well, it's because I build off my success, not off my fears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, again, the easy way, the easy path, it's something that we can learn to not want, to get comfortable being uncomfortable, to welcome that negative voice, like, there's the shit talker, there he is again, right? Nah, I'm gonna challenge him and just expect that he's coming and reaching that cookie jar, right? Hang on, shit talker. Let me grab a cookie real quick. All right, you're gone. Now let's go. Next thing, execute, to where you program it to be, your inner you is your number one fan.
Has to be. Or quite honestly, it's going to be the reason you don't find happiness.
Right. Because if your inner you isn't your number one fan, doesn't believe in you, nobody else is going to. Like, it has to start with you. And I think a lot of people need to let go of that being, I need to be more humble. Yeah, that's important, but you need to be confident in yourself. You need to be confident in yourself. And trust me, I get that too even today. Like, I'm going to be wearing another suit today. Like I still hear like that negativity on simple things like that. And it's like, no, like I'm doing this for me. I'm my number one fan. And I think that everybody needs to be that.
I agree. And quite honestly, I don't know why or how in my life that happened, but I've always, as long as I can remember, had incredible belief in myself. And that is part of this podcast, is wanting to share that and some of the tips that allow us to take risk and move forward, and share them, because it's not exclusive to certain people. We are all capable of exercising our mind to see possibility and hope and inspiration over negativity, doubt, and fear. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't happen on accident. And I think too many times people live their lives on accident and just deal with whatever comes to them, versus having a purpose, having the big goals, the big dreams, and knowing where their life's headed. And that scares the shit out of me. And it scared me. There was a time I woke up in my life and I was like, wait a second, I'm literally doing that. I'm literally like working all day, coming home. I have the same routine every day. Like, this can't be all my life's supposed to be about. And then I wasn't afraid to make changes. Yeah.
Thankfully, you came to that realization, and hopefully some of these insights today can help some others come to that realization. So what do we have homework for?
I think it's
next week. I'll have it right here.
No, it's good. I think what we want to do is we really want to delve into this a little bit. And if you remember our podcast about the Garden of Dreams, we kind of talked about life is your garden, right? And you're planting your crops. Like, what are you planting? And one of the big things you have to deal with is the weeds. And to me, the weeds are this right here. What goes on in my head that nobody else can really see, Nobody else knows I'm going through it, but it's really preventing me from getting where I want to go.
Growing without you even doing anything.
Right. And honestly, it's growing without you doing anything, but you're aware of it, and then you're forgetting to water the actual crops you want, right? The growth and the development. So I want our listeners, and props to the viewers on YouTube and the listeners on the podcast apps, whatever you're listening to, for doing your homework and submitting it to us. It's extremely humbling. And I want to say it's surprising, but it's not, because like we sat down and we had a vision for where this podcast would go and how it would impact people. But it does kind of surprise me a little bit that so many people are willing to be part of the movement and want to share so much time with us.
Yeah. Quick side note too. I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't call it homework, because homework has always had like a negative connotation.
What do you want to call it?
I don't know. Something we can talk about later, but I don't know. Purpose.
Yeah. Task.
Yeah. So just something that sounds like you want to do it, right?
Well, here's what you want to do.
Yeah.
You're here listening. You're here listening. So here's what we want to do this week is we want you to really stop and take inventory over the next 7 days. When that negative voice comes into your head, what is it telling you? What actual statement is it? You know, you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You can't do this. Like whatever it says, like take inventory and write that down. Actually write down, what does your negative voice tell you? And then I want you to think about how long has that specific voice been there, and identify what kind of triggers it for you. So then you can start to really analyze, wait a second, it's these kind of activities that crop this up in my head. So now I can start to prepare for it. If I know I'm going to that activity, or I have to do something like that today, well, I need to have my cookie jar on standby. I need to know all the good things because I know this is coming until we train it away, right? And you'll eventually train it further and further away, but we have to have a plan for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great stuff. I'm personally excited to get on this purpose work, because yesterday I had a day where that negative voice was pretty strong.
Yeah.
Pretty strong.
And I think that's important. Like we shared before we came on, you know, yesterday for me, man, I just felt a lot of tension, a lot of pressure to like create, and you know, what if this doesn't work? And I could feel it. And fortunately for me, I do this. Like I've explored this, so I know how to get off track of it fairly quick. And a lot of times for me, it's workouts and just getting my mind back to, okay, I just made my body better. Let me get my mind better. So I think that's the thing is we want to do is kind of start setting success steps. How do we stop it? But before we can stop the negative voice, we got to figure out where it's coming from. And I really want you guys to get personal and identify whose voice you actually hear telling you the negative topics. Like, what is it they're saying? And like, who is it? Because for most of us, we know when we hear it, it's my voice, or it's Ali's voice, or it's somebody in my past voice. And then we can start to work towards, okay, do we forgive them? Like, was whatever they did forgivable? Do we need to have conversations, or do we just realize, hey, we're creating this ourselves and it's time to quit holding ourselves back?
Yeah, 100%. So just to recap, part 1, take inventory of what your inner voice is telling you. Part 2, what triggers that inner voice and how long has it been there? And then part 3, whose voice do you hear? Right? And then, of course, email us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Would love to see more and more of these insights. We've been getting some good ones.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's very humbling to share the journey with you, and we hope you guys are getting a lot out of this. I know we do. It's fun for us to sit and talk about this and to share with Alex and Ali and everybody else, because it's growth for all of us. And I think that's the cool thing about this podcast is you're literally here with us from the very beginning. So we're all going to kind of grow together on this journey.
Amen.
Cool.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the week. The closeout. I forget about this part. All right, team. Remember, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. So we will see you all next week.
This has been the On Purpose Podcast. If you'd like to follow up on this week's action items or give your feedback, please reach us by email, which is in the description below. If you'd like to keep up with Jared or Ali, check out their Instagram accounts. both of which are in the description below. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.